Okay, so today's class is on the secrets of effective texting with marketing automation. And I'm going to be showing you guys how you can start using texting to immediately improve sales conversion, customer retention, and produce greater profit as a result. Now, if you have any questions that come up, feel free to ask them as we go along. I do have the chat panel up, so if you use the chat section, I will be able to see that, and then I'll be able to update you, possibly answer it in real time. For sure, we'll answer it at the end. We're going to open Q&A, and we'll take all questions, and we'll take as long as you guys need for me to answer those questions then. So let's get into it. Today, what I'm going to be covering is why texting is 10 times more powerful than email when used correctly. So I'll be focusing more on the used correctly portion, because you guys obviously already know that texting is more powerful than email, but what's the used correctly portion? So I'll get into that. We're going to talk about how to immediately increase profits with the most powerful text message you can send to new prospects. We're going to talk about how to double your sales conversions with one text. 2 and 3 are related. The common element of all customers who buy. How to quadruple the number of people you talk to on the phone with a single text message. How to get prospects to give you their mobile number. And finally, the most powerful use of texting that most people are avoiding entirely, which is in large part why I started this. I had a little run-in with a guy on Facebook in the Infusionsoft Open user group who was saying that you didn't need something like Fix Your Funnel to be able to do effective texting. And my argument was that it depends on how you're using texting. And then he explained how he was using it, and he was doing exactly the opposite of what you should be doing with texting. But he thought he was so smart, which is probably because he was wet behind the ears, but that's okay. We all start there. My name is Ryan Chapman. I'm the author of 3 books that would be important to you, which is Would You Like to Go Big, which is all about upsells, and then How to Fix Your Funnel, which simply is a way of looking at your business so that you focus on the thing that actually will produce an increase in profit versus all the other stuff that we get tempted to focus on. And then finally, the messaging connection, which talks about how to increase profits by connecting with people the way that they want. And I think to really understand how that last one, which is all about messaging and what we're talking about today, we need to take a little bit of a look back, because it gives us some perspective on the whole situation. So this chart's an interesting one. It's 4 years old, but it's still relevant to us today. It shows PC units shipped versus smartphone units shipped. And this one is really interesting because for many people, you've been using a PC for a long time. And so that kind of, in many ways, shaped your experience, maybe some of the way that you see the world, whether you are aware of it or not. And for many people on today's training, you probably spent a bulk of your internet time on a PC. And you may still do that today. One of the things I've noticed that's common about folks that use marketing automation is because most marketing automation tools demand the use of a computer, still a bulk of their internet is consumed over the computer, although most of their consumption still is happening on the mobile device. But this epic from about 94, that's when America Online really made a showing, and so a lot more people started getting online. In fact, if you see this increase in PC sales, a bulk of that was pushed by the internet, because you can see how long it was kind of flat relative to that last 15 years. But the back part of most people's experience is PC internet. And because of that, they maybe don't think about things the same way. But this last little bit, the last 9 years, has been a revolutionary change. And I don't go back to 2007 and giving this perspective, because even though the iPhone was introduced and the smartphone was kind of born at that point in time, it wasn't until about 2010, 2011 that more traffic actually was on the internet was happening on the mobile phone versus the PC. And this all gives us kind of this perspective to recognize that things have dramatically changed in our recent past. Someone just asked for a replay. Yeah, you're getting a replay, so don't worry about that. If you miss whatever you missed, you'll catch. So the interesting part about this last part here, you can say, wow, 1.4 billion smartphones, that's a lot. Well, today, remember this chart is 4 years old. There are 4 billion smartphones on the planet. 4 billion. Like, if you think about that and you consider, the percentage of the population that is at a terrible poverty level and all that. It's just kind of amazing that there are 4 billion smartphones out in the market today. So 4 billion. And what that tells you is that if you're in any first world country, just about everybody has a smartphone. And there are iPhones and Androids in the US and Canada. It's about 50-50, just in case you're wondering. If you go worldwide, it skews because of those 4 billion, just about 1 billion are iPhones and the other 3 billion are Android. So that's kind of the split worldwide. But in your first world countries, it's about a 50-50 split with a slight lean towards the iPhone. So that just gives you some perspective on how many devices there are out there that allow for messaging to occur. And every single phone, even the dumb phones, the flip phones, the feature phones, all of those come with the texting app enabled. So, but what's really happened with this explosion of smartphones is that everyone basically now has a mobile phone number. And what's interesting about that is more unique almost than maybe social security numbers, because those sometimes get stolen. But the mobile phone number is actually one of the most unique identifiers that we have for individuals. And that's important from a marketing and sales perspective. But what this is ultimately telling us is that you want to open the door to texting as soon as possible. When I say open the door, I don't just mean legally, I mean psychologically. You want your prospects and your customers to understand that they can text with your company, and you want your company to be text enabled. And there's a number of reasons. We'll get into this. I did a recent post in the Fix Your Funnel user group about people texting to ask people to call and about call energy. And what a lot of people don't consider is that it takes a lot of energy for most people to make a phone call. There are exceptional few. They tend to be entrepreneurs and salespeople because they've learned to use the phone. So they don't mind picking up the phone and making a call. I fall into that camp. I don't mind whatsoever. My wife, on the other hand, falls into the camp of most of the population of the world. And that is people that would rather not call unless they absolutely have to. And so they would much rather text. They'd much rather deal with people through that medium than they would through an actual phone call. And part of it is because people just don't know how long that phone call is going to take. They don't know maybe what's going to be involved in it. So a whole host of things, but understand that's really important because it tells you how important it is to open the door for texting. When I say psychologically, what that means is we want to make it so that not only do they understand they can, but they feel like they should. And so we'll talk about how to get to that place. The other point that's important here is email is on the phone, but it's getting much harder to get opens, reads, and response. And that's in large part because of something called machine learning. Machine learning is being employed very heavily now by email service providers. So you guys have probably seen people complaining quite a bit about email delivery, whether it's with Infusionsoft or ActiveCampaign or whatever the program is. I happen to be in a lot of these different groups because of different companies we have. But everyone's complaining about email. And it's not really the sender's fault as much as it is like the tool's fault, as much as it is just the changing landscape of email. And so that's not going to change. In fact, there's quite a few dimensions going on with texting as well, although it's a lot simpler. And so we'll get a little bit into that in the Q&A period if you guys want. So when I talk about opening the door for texting, what we want to focus on are 3 core components. The first one is campaign messages, then automated conversations, and live messaging. Even though automated conversations is usually where you would want to start, I'm going to talk about campaign messages first because it'll kind of open some doors that we're going to cover then in automated conversations. And live messaging is super critical, and we'll get into why that's the case. But let's start with campaign messages, because I think if you understand how to use campaign messages properly, you can get a lot of things right that maybe aren't giving you the kind of result that you're looking for. So the starting place where I like to start with people, as soon as they've opened they've got permission to text people, is start looking at their email-only campaigns and start figuring out how they can lace in texting into them. Now, marketing rule number 19, which is a rule I just invented, so don't worry about the first 18, although I've been working on getting that list together. But marketing rule number 19 states that before you decide how to lead capture, you have to decide how you're going to sell. And that'll become more apparent as we go through this conversation. But if I had someone that I was working with from the very beginning, I would tell them from the very beginning, start collecting cell phone numbers and permission to text so that you can start sending text messages in your email-only campaigns right now. That's the first kind of step. And there's 3 types of messages you want to put into campaigns. And the first one is a content delivery. And that's like a link to a video or PDF or a resource. And this is a little sample I pulled from one of our campaigns. It says, Bill, here's a link to a video on how top Infusionsoft users are using Slack. I got the link. And then the important part is this last one, which is, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now, one of the interesting things about texting is it's a very intimate form of communication. The smartphone doesn't leave a 3-foot radius of most people ever. It's always within 3 feet. So 3 feet with them when they're in the shower, when they're in bed, when they're using the restroom. That cell phone, that smartphone is always around them. And so, understanding that means that that's a very intimate form of communication. Now, the phone call is a little bit different because until that phone call is received, there's no communication that really occurs there. But with a text message, if you send a text message to somebody, they're going to see that. Now, this is very different from an email because if you send someone an email, there's a very good chance. In fact, the odds are that they will never see that email. But with a text message, they're going to see it. So it's very intimate. So one of the features of text messaging is not only is it going to be seen, not only is it intimate, but it is intended for conversation. And that's like one of the core points that I hope you get out of today's training is text messaging is intended for conversation. Now, how do we know this? Because before businesses started being able to do texting, humans had been doing texting for about 15 years. And in that time, 10, 15 years of texting, it was always a one-to-one conversational medium. Very, very infrequently was it used just to tell somebody something or speak at someone. But it was almost always, like 99.999% of the time, a conversational medium. And so you need to understand that about the medium so that you use it properly. So even when I'm just delivering content, I want to try and engage in conversation because that's the nature of the media. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Implies you can respond to me. I know you can respond to me. Please do, because I'd love to hear what you think about what I just sent you. Okay, so that love to hear your thoughts is critical. The next type, and this is the one that will double your sales, is the conversation starter question. And this should be related to campaign content, which means you have context in every campaign. There's some topic that you've covered in an email, or maybe in the case of like this text message, I've sent a video about how top users are using Slack. So there's a topic, there's a context. And so in that context, I have a situation where I can ask a question that is open-ended. Now, open-ended means that there's not a one-word answer for the most part. They can answer any way they want. There's not a wrong answer. That's really important from a psychological standpoint because most of us, not everybody, but most of us want to be right. We want to be good. We want to be accepted. And because of that, we don't want a question we can't answer. So here's a sample that I pulled again from our campaigns. I sent you a video on how to use Slack with Infusionsoft yesterday. What did you think? Now, that's a really important question because it allows them to engage in conversation if they're ready. Not everybody will, but if they're ready to engage in conversation, because you've opened that door. You've opened the door and said, come on in. And because of that, you're respecting, one, the technology and what feature it brings, which is the ability to interact through conversation. And you're doing that with the campaign. Now, the beautiful part about doing this with the campaign is the campaign doesn't get sick. The campaign doesn't get tired of doing it. The campaign doesn't decide, well, today's been a long day, I'm not going to send it out. The campaign just does it. And so that's the beautiful part of campaign. It offsets the human nature element of what disrupts a business's cash flow. And it just is consistent. It just does it every time. At least it should, right? And then this another sample of this kind of question, and this has kind of got a secret formula in it, which I want you to pick up on, is this is actually the end of a automated conversation. And this is something I'm going to teach you guys in the next section here. But I want to highlight it here is, great, I'll email you the link to the book. This was from an automated conversation where I was inviting people to get a copy of my book, The Messaging Connection, digital or audio version. I'll show you a sample of that. But I said, by the way, why did you request the book today? And this, I'm going to come back to this, but this is a secret formula in it that you can use immediately that is very powerful. But this is again, operating within the context in which we know they're receiving the text message to ask an open-ended question or a conversation starter question. And finally, the last type of text message that you would want to send in a campaign is a reference to an email sent. Now, earlier I alluded to the fact that email service providers are using machine learning. And what they're doing with machine learning is they're looking for patterns. Machine learning, what it does basically, uses mathematical formulas to look at patterns in what seemingly is random data. And so one of the things they're looking for in the email is they're looking for, is the person engaging with the email? So they can detect that by an actual open where the person has navigated to the email in their, whatever the device may be or whatever it is, and then interacting with it in some way. And so each engagement you have with your email, whether it's just whatever percentage it is of all emails you sent, impacts the delivery of all your emails. And so you really want that engagement with your emails to occur. And there, by the way, email engagement is ranked. And I covered this in a recent podcast episode Trent and I did in our Beyond the Messaging Connection series, which you can catch at our website or on iTunes or whatever. But in it, we talk about how there's different levels of engagement in terms of email service providers. And that different level of engagement is a click has, an open has some minute value, a click has a slightly in more valuable value, but the ultimate value is a response. And so you'll see how this is a kind of a trend you may want to employ even in email, even though we're going to be focusing on messaging. So in my sample here, I said, Bill, it's Ryan from Fix Your Funnel. Again, important to identify yourself. What's really fascinating here is by me saying it's Ryan from Fix Your Funnel, I've injected my name into their smartphone. We'll get into that in just a little bit. Because you asked about texting, I just sent you an important email. Let me know what you think. Okay, so I'm giving them a reason. I'm referencing an email. And again, I'm doing what I did in all three of these messages. I'm requesting some sort of conversation. Let me know what you think. So I'm telling them to go check the email, look at it. Now, why would I do that in the first place? Why wouldn't I just throw all the information in the text message? Well, one of the limits of text messages is they can only be so long. In a standard text message, we can only go 160 characters typically, but you can go a little bit longer, and in some countries, they'll just merge them together. But you have some limit. You know, if you sent a 1,000-word text message, it probably wouldn't be welcomed. Texting is inherently supposed to be these short messages, so we want to kind of keep them short and concise and to the point. So that's kind of one of the limitations. But one of the benefits of email, while it's difficult maybe to get that email seen and interacted with, the benefit of it is it can carry a lot of rich information. So we can have images, we can have those great links, we can have all sorts of things in that email that maybe would allow us to express more than we can in just a plain text message. But the plain text message is being seen, so we can push them back to the email. So that's kind of the benefit of that. But those are the three primary types of text messages that you're going to want to include in your campaigns, okay? And the real secret here, the most important text message for new prospects, is the one that includes the why did you question. So that's the secret formula I was alluding to earlier. Why did you is all about context and motivation. And the why did you question, even if it's not answered in response, does something. See, why did you causes a person to have to process. And one of the fascinating things about the way our brain works and just kind of the psychology of humans is that even if we don't verbally answer a question, but we internally in our mind answer the question, it impacts the way that we see the world. And so this question is powerful because if they do answer it, which is a good chance that they will, if they're even in the ballpark of where we're hoping they will be to becoming a customer, if they do answer it, it allows them to process some things that will actually start to change the way that they see the world, because they're taking the information that we presented to them in the first place that got them to start down this journey of engaging with our company, and they're having to do an evaluation. And evaluation questions are super powerful because we actually change the rules that we use in our brain for viewing the world as we evaluate things. Because we put them into a priority, we create a hierarchy of the value of the information that we're receiving, we're processing. So why did you makes us look at what are the motivations that caused me to start down this road? So if someone requested my book, what led them to that point? What was going on in their life that made them think, hey, this is worth a portion of my precious time? Because we all know our time is super precious. Even if we waste it sometimes, there's some motivation we have for that. And so that why did you is a secret formula that you can use in your own business. And you always know context because of the marketing automation side of things. So you always have the ability to do the last part of the why did you question, which in this case, because it's an automated conversation with a keyword, I know that they were requesting my book. There was no other way that they could have gotten to this point. And so all I have to do is take why did you, and then how did they get to this point? Why did you request the book today? And I like to put in the word today because it inserts kind of that of right now. Why did you do it right now? Not why did you do it in general, but why did you do it now? And that can also help us as if they actually respond to it or if they just process it, can help prepare them to make a buying decision, which is ultimately what we're going for in marketing and sales. All right, so let's look at the automated conversation because this is a kind of that primal way to open up the door. I think it's the best way to open the door because there's a couple ways when we look at legally, how do we open the door for texting or get permission? There are two primary ways. One is you can use a web form, whether that's like a Facebook lead ad or a web form or a landing page or whatever you want to use to have people give you information about themselves. You could collect a phone number there, and you could then collect express permission with a checkbox that they have to check that says, yes, you can text me in some form. It doesn't have to be in that plane of a language, but in some way it has to be clear that they're giving you permission to text them. That's one way to do it. And that's perfectly fine. If you get people to check a checkbox and say, yeah, you can text me, great. That's fantastic. That will do. The other way is to have them actually text you, which is even more powerful because it shows and demonstrates intent. And only they could have texted you. I could have gotten your phone number and filled out a form with your phone number and checked the checkbox, and you didn't really give permission. So while it's still acceptable, it's not as powerful as if they actually text you. So I like to use keywords and phone numbers to have people engage with my company. Now, it may not gather as many leads as just asking for a name and an email, but it also doesn't give you the opportunity to sell the way that you want to when you only gather an email. That's probably the most terrible way to grow a business. I know I've done it with just email, but I never asked for just email. I always asked for a lot more because I wanted more options to be able to have a sales conversation and go towards a buying decision. But I like the keyword because it does do a little bit of filtering of noise. In other words, it takes people out of the conversation that really aren't serious about the conversation yet. And yeah, I'll have to earn their trust in some way, but that's okay. I'm okay with that because a strong offer is always going to get them there. But in this scenario, this is our demo keyword. I'm actually showing you our conversation that we use for a lot of our lead capture. And I'm going to break this down with you so you can understand what an automated conversation is if you don't already, and how to construct the best automated conversation. So they all start with a keyword, and what's beautiful is just as they text in demo, I already know quite a bit. And that's a really powerful place to be as a business owner. I know that I can text them, I can call them, I can remarket them on Facebook and Instagram. I know why they texted me. The keyword tells me exactly why. And I have a tag applied to a contact record with at least their cell phone number at that point that tells me, this is their general area of interest. So that's pretty powerful right there. And I consider that to be even more powerful than just getting an email address from a web form. Web form gives you context, so you have all that. But you have one of who knows how many emails that they have, and hopefully it's one that they actually check. But with the cell phone number, I've got a pretty good level of certainty that I am in a position where I'm going to be able to interact with this person if I maintain their trust. So that's the first part. The next part is in my initial message. Now, you'll notice that the following two messages that I send after this initial one have media attached to them. Those are called MMS. Now, that's currently only available in the US and Canada. So if you're in Australia or the UK, we currently can't do that. There are changes in the industry, and we're pushing really hard to try and make some things happen for you if you're in those other countries. But in the US and Canada, we can use media. Now, the deal with media is it has a slight delay over just pure text. So if you're wanting a real snappy conversation, just do text only. And if you are wanting to do media, because of the reasons I'm going to talk about is that we get into this, don't do media in the very first message that comes back to someone after the keyword. And the primary reason for this is because we want to give them some really quick feedback that what they did worked. That's really important for people, because people, again, as humans, we're always looking for confirmation that we're on the right path, so to speak. And so if someone texts in this keyword to your phone number, we want to get them an immediate response so that they know that what they did worked. And so I always do a pure SMS, a pure text message, no media attached, for my first step, regardless of how I'm going to do the rest of the conversation. You should do the same. Don't do media in the first step. It delays too much, because it can delay anywhere from 5 seconds to up to, I've seen, a minute. It just depends on the network and the connections and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole host of factors, but because of that delay, I don't like to do that. But what I do in this first message, because I know I'm going to send media, and I'm going to explain why, because it's really, really important, and it's getting more important today than it even was before. I want to set some expectations, that way they don't think something's broken when they reply with their name, and then it takes a little bit before they get the message. So I said it might take a few seconds, okay? But I always ask for the name first and the email second. And why do I do that? Well, I want to know who the person is I'm interacting with. I'm in the beginning of forming a relationship with someone, so I want to know the way that they want to be called. And so I want to know their name. I ask for email, even though I understand it's not as effective, because it's still effective. It's not as effective as texting, but it's still effective, and it definitely has a place in my overall approach. So I'm going to collect the email address. But the reason that this one takes a little time is because of the contact card. Now, to me, one of the most important things I can do really quickly in an automated conversation is I want to try and get that contact card on their phone. Now, some devices will actually extract information out of the contact card. Some will not. Some will just deduce a particular name from someone based on the message. And so there's some ways I could probably enhance even these messages if I wanted to get my name on their phone through machine learning, which what machine learning does is it analyzes all incoming data that's coming into that smartphone and tries to associate that with points of contact in order to identify an individual for the owner of the phone. And you may have seen this before. If somebody texts you, hey, this is Ryan with Fix Your Funnel, and then they call from that same number and you say, maybe, and then the name of the person. So you'll see that happen from time to time. And that's because the machine learning is able to deduce who you're interacting with without you having the contact information on their phone. But there's going to be an even bigger push, again, because what I stated earlier was that about 51% of the population in your developed countries, so that's the United States and Canada, Australia, UK, those kind of places, they have an iPhone. And in iOS 13, there's a new feature coming out, which if you are not a contact, people are going to turn this on. It's called call silencing and blocked contacts. And what it means is that if someone is not in their contact book, they're not even going to see the call come in. So if you work off of phone calls, meaning you call warm prospects in order to close sales, your 50% of your world, and maybe it skews even higher depending on who your market is and that kind of thing, but 50% of your world, and I'm sure Android's got a similar feature either out or coming out, but 50% of your callers, all the iPhone callers, will have the potential to turn on silence unknown callers. Now, I can't tell you how many times I have seen posts on social media where people are like, I keep on getting these calls from people I don't recognize. It's getting annoying. It's going to only get worse because of the way technology is changing. It makes it so easy for spammers and stupid marketers to do things that aren't going to be as effective. And because of that, it's going to make it even harder for you if you need phone calls to be part of your sales process. Because of this little thing here, they're going to toggle this silence unknown callers. And if you're not in their contact book, then when you call, they won't even hear it ring. They won't see anything. You'll just be sent straight to voicemail. And so you will show up on the recents, but if they're not checking that, they may not even see you. So it's going to be just like email. So it's going to be pretty tough. And that means you need to get installed on their phone as a contact card. Now, what this automated conversation is doing also is it's gathering additional contact info, in this case, the first and last name or first name, depending on how they respond, and the email address, and adding it to the contact record with the mobile phone number. So that's, you guys should all be familiar with that, but that's really powerful because that means you're building that database. But also that means that we can start having information that we gathered in a previous step available to start personalizing. And so in this conversation, I've personalized in two ways. One, in the response as soon as they send me the name. So that's pretty powerful because it feels intimate for the person. Nobody is deceived into thinking that this is a real person responding. They can tell pretty quickly that this is an automated portion of the conversation. The media can help soften that a little bit if you were trying to get that effect of a real person. But you see that also in the image, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to, again, get their attention. In this case, I've merged in their name again, or my name in this case, right? But it's the name of the contact. And that personalization just helps keep attention. Now, the number one reason why you lose people in kind of this lead capture flow, whether it's this, online, or whatever, is usually not because they're not interested. The reason you lose them is because there's so many things vying for their attention. So when you understand that, then you want to do little things like this. In this case, I'm using Nifty Images, which is an option with Fix Your Funnel to integrate, and that allows me to do some dynamic image text overlaying on the image. So at the point that I receive their email address, I'm also applying a tag, and then I'm using that tag for automation. So that allows me then, if I want to send some resource via email and start establishing that relationship, I can do that there. Now, the other thing I have involved in this message is a trackable link, which means if they tap that link, that we're going to apply a tag, and that can be used either for further determining engagement or for changing the automation, because different actions tell us different things about the prospect. And so that one of these automated conversations can do quite a bit in terms of establishing connection, getting inserted into their phone, keeping attention, and then finding out how interested they are in what we're talking about. And if they follow this link, we consider that to be a pretty good sign that they're really interested in what we're doing, because that survey is designed to help them know how Fix Your Funnel could help them. So you can do the same thing in your business. But then if you were looking really closely, you may have discovered that the most important part was right there. Why did you? And in this case, it's text demo to the number, our number today. So you see the question, once you know the formula, is not hard to do, but that's the most important part in this whole thing. If someone doesn't get to this final step, that tells us something too, right? So we don't have to stress out about, well, what if they don't get the final step of the automated conversation? Don't worry about that. If they don't get there, that tells you something about them. Either they got interrupted or they're not interested. But you can then decide, depending on how frequently that happens, if you want to do something to try and address that. But when they get to this final question, what we're trying to do is open the door to live texting at that point. And so it's really critical. I didn't always used to do this, but since I've learned from observing what works and what doesn't, I always ask an open-ended question at the end of any interaction, whether it's a campaign builder message going out or an automated conversation. And I like to keep my automated conversations in this 3-step range. You can go longer. I don't like to do that, because what I want to do with the automated part is just do the mundane, the repetitive part. You could do this all with live texting. You could just say, okay, guys, if somebody texts in demo, here's the script, follow the script. You could certainly do that, but you know that they're not going to do it right every time. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to forget or whatever. And so I use the automation to facilitate what should be a fairly mundane process on our side that we want to be executed the same every time. But I don't want it to go too long, because I want to then engage in live conversation, because that is the real superpower of texting. And so again, that's why we want this most important part, which is, why did you? And do the context. Again, not everybody's going to answer the question, but those that do are the ones that are going to be most interested in taking the next step. So here's a little snapshot of what it looks like in Fix Your Funnel, just so that you can see. And I've had some people, because I've taught this class a few times, people have complained and go, man, Ryan, you didn't get very technical. Well, the reason I don't get very technical in terms of getting into the software and showing you how to do stuff is because, from my perspective, I'd rather that you didn't have to learn that either, and you just message into support on my team and say, here's what I'm trying to do, can you direct me? So instead of you having to learn the software, just tell us what you want to do and let our support team direct you so that you can get that result pulled together. What I would like you to focus on is what we're talking about here, which is, how do I architect the conversation? How do I architect a campaign message so that it actually will achieve what I want to achieve? Now, a little earlier, I mentioned a little bit about call energy, and we talked about how it takes people a lot of energy to call. Well, recently I noticed that there's quite a few users who are trying to compel people to go from text message straight to the phone. And so while we're here, I just want to address that real quickly. If you're asking people to call from a text message, you're missing out on a huge opportunity. Now, if you are getting people to call, congratulations, that's amazing and fantastic. So you will want to continue to invite people to call you, but I would encourage you to ask an open-ended question that's relevant to the context of the message you're sending out that will engage them in a text conversation, because there are far more people who will not call you than there are that will. And so if you're getting by getting people to call you from a text message, if you're saying a text message and you're getting enough people to call you that you're having some success, you're making some profit, you're happy with the business, if you will tweak that and add a way for people to answer a why did you question or call you, do both in there, what you'll find is you'll probably see a dramatic increase in sales, because you're going to have a lot more conversations. A lot more people are more disposed to answer this question than they are to call. So if you are doing that currently, I would encourage you strongly to add in a why did you question, or some variant. So the why did you is a simple formula that you can use where you don't have to think too hard. If you have a more specific context, then a more specific open-ended question would be more appropriate. But if you're not sure and you're just trying to get started and you don't want to stress about it too much, just go with the why did you question. And that will always work appropriately, because that's a great question. And by the way, the BTW that I put in the front of it, that's what we call a softener in psychological terms. It just softens that question, because that question is fairly direct. Why did you do something? That's a fairly direct question. It can be read in a number of different ways. But the BTW before it not only uses up 5 extra characters with a comma in the space before why, and it really softens the question. It makes it feel a lot easier for someone to answer. So that's why I throw that in there. If you want to use that, I'd invite you to use that technique as well. Okay. So I mentioned this before, but I want to reiterate it again, because it's really important, because there's so many people that unwittingly become annoying marketers because they only speak at contacts. Now, you can do an evaluation to see if you've fallen accidentally into this camp. Nobody wants to be annoying for the most part. I know sometimes as an older sibling, I wanted to be annoying to my little brothers and sisters. But you shouldn't, right? You don't want to be annoying as a business owner. You don't want to come off in that way that doesn't reflect what you really feel in your heart. And so you want to stop speaking at context. Now, I'm using this in particular in the context of texting, but this applies equally to email. So go look at your emails, go look at any text messages you have set up, and ask yourself, am I speaking at them, or am I inviting them to speak with me? And the reason why is because most profit is a single question away. Now, you can evaluate this for yourself if you want. A lot of people seem to think that if somebody doesn't buy from you, then they just buy it from somebody else. But more commonly than not, if somebody doesn't buy, then they don't do anything. That's the human nature part of us. That if we start going down a path and then it doesn't work out, or we have concerns or questions and they're not resolved, we tend to do nothing. We tend to delay, to procrastinate working on that problem versus going and finding another solution. Only in very extreme cases do we seek until we find a solution. And some people are maybe more prone to be that way, so they won't relate with this, but most people actually do nothing. And so what you don't realize is that most of your sales you're getting right now, if you're not inviting people to enter into a conversation with you, most of the sales you're getting are sales that come in spite of you, not because of you. Maybe you have some great marketing, maybe it's compelling, maybe people look at it and they go, oh yeah, that's it, that's what I want. But there are way more sales to be had if you can just answer one question. And so you want to remember that texting is all about conversation in the first place. That's part of what its strength is. But if you use it that way, what you're going to do is you're going to open the door for people to ask questions or express a concern, and at the very least engage in conversation. And there's a little formula I want you to always remember, which is more conversations equals more sales equals more profit. Now, if this isn't the case for you, if you're having a ton of conversations, you're not having more sales, more profit, then we just need to tweak the way that your conversation goes. But for most people, if they simply had more conversations with prospects, they would have more sales and as a result, more profit. And because if you're in business at all, if you're making any money at all, and you're not doing this, then you have the most to gain, because there's a ton more people that would buy from you if they just felt like they could ask that question. So open that door, understand, and remember, texting is about conversation. If I couldn't drill anything else into your head, that would be it, because it's so important, so impactful. Now, I promised also I'd tell you how to quadruple your phone call answer rate. What that means is most people that make phone calls out to warm prospects, this is not a cold prospect technique, because it involves sending a text. And if you don't have permission, then you don't want to be sending text messages to people. But if we are working with warm prospects and we're trying to call those prospects, and you want to quadruple the rate at which you speak to people, then you're going to want to do what I'm going to teach you here. Now, for most people that do outbound calls to warm leads, they'll know that the most common outcome when they make calls is they get voicemail. And when you understand why that is, then you'll see how powerful this technique I'm going to teach you is for your business. Now, the reason that people don't answer, the number one reason people don't answer, is because they don't recognize the number. And I gave you a little warning, a little heads up, because right now iOS 13 is not out. When that comes out, if you're doing phone calls, it's going to make it a lot harder. So you really got to pay attention to this. You send this text message. And this text message has two key elements to it. First is it identifies who you are. Now, this can go completely against what many salespeople believe. They don't want to identify themselves. They want to sneak up on their prey and get them. But the reality is that's not an option anymore. That might have worked back when telephones didn't have caller ID and all that kind of stuff, but it certainly doesn't work now with smartphones. Most people are just not answering the phone anymore if they don't recognize the number. The only exception would be if you're calling real estate agents, because they always work off of phone calls, so they answer everyone. But for most people, they just don't answer unless they're looking for a call. So usually that's not going to be the case. So Bill, it's Ryan from Fix Your Funnel. I'm clearly identifying who I am. And then the next important part is why you are calling. I'm going to call in a few minutes to see if you'd like help incorporating texting into your marketing. So that is really important, because when you're calling people, especially warm prospects, if your marketing is done right so that you're gathering the right kind of leads, they're going to want to talk to you if you identify who you are and why you're calling. If people do not want to talk to you when they identify who you are and why you're calling, you have a different problem entirely. So in marketing and sales, there's two things. There's mechanisms and there's psychology. You have a psychological problem. Your offer is not compelling. You must be gathering leads under the wrong pretenses, because people, if they see this text message and then they still avoid you, that means you've got a real problem with your messaging, your marketing approach, and all that. It's not mechanics, it's your message and your offer. So you want to address that. But if you do this, the most common thing that will start to happen is you'll get people texting back to reschedule. Because the second most common reason for people not answering, besides not recognizing your number, is that they're busy. They're in a meeting. They're in the restroom, they're unavailable, they're on another call, they're in the middle of some other project. There's a whole host of reasons that people don't answer. And when you do give them this pre-call text message, what happens is you get the people who are interested, because they know who you are and why you're calling. They'll reply to you and just say, hey, I can't talk right now. Can you call me at 3? And any salesperson knows that a scheduled time is a ton better than no time. Just calling at because you don't know what their schedule is. And so when you do that, that's fantastic. The second most common thing that will happen as a result is people will just answer. And then they'll say, oh, I'm so glad you called. Thanks for texting me. I wouldn't have answered otherwise. We heard that a ton as we started to incorporate this strategy. And so have our users that have done this. The third is they just won't answer. That's okay. That's already happening. If you're calling, you already know that's happening. So this is just that's not going to prevent that from happening. Some people, not only do they not want to talk to you, when they recognize you, they don't want to talk to you. That's fine. That happens. And then if you're lucky, you get some people to text back and say, I'm not interested. Because the last thing you want to do is be pursuing and wasting a bunch of human resource time on calling people who just aren't interested. So if you explicitly say who you are and what you're about, why you're calling, and they say, I'm not interested, that's fantastic. Take them off the list. You don't have to worry about calling them again. And if you do this, you'll quadruple your answer rate, which means if I place 100 phone calls, and in the past I was only getting 5 people to answer, now I'm going to be getting about 20 people that I will connect with and start having conversations. Sometimes people will just have text conversations with you. Don't shy away with that. Go ahead and do that. But sometimes those conversations, they'll just pick up the phone. Other times those texts will conversations will segue to the phone. But either way, your conversation rate is going, or your answer rate is going to increase. And as a result, more conversations, more sales, more profit. These are simple formulas to put in place. But when you do this, it's super effective at increasing the results that you're going to get. So this all leads to the biggest secret of texting, the thing that most people avoid, like it's the plague, which just bewilders me, because if you have any business sense, you got to talk to people in order to grow a business. And there are people out there that sell this garbage about, automate the whole thing away, don't talk to anybody. They have completely missed the boat. And if you're listening to them, I would challenge you to reconsider, because that is the worst philosophy you could possibly have. Because the biggest secret of texting, and you guys probably guessed it already because we've alluded to it all along, is live texting. And the important part for live texting, you have to have push notifications, a smartphone, and a web app that you can control the messages through. So I'm really excited because just yesterday we launched the beta of our new iOS app, which is a preview of what's to come for the Android folks as well. But in that app, we just redid it from the ground up, and it's fantastic. The old one got the job done. The new one is actually fantastic. You'll actually enjoy using it. And there's a couple things that we incorporated in there that I think are going to be real game changers for folks. One is, for one, it's just fast. It's faster even than your native app, messaging app that you have on your phone. Number two is it allows for a feature we called scheduled replies, which means, and this one is really powerful. I've got a dentist friend who is doing this, but he wasn't doing it with his business line. He was doing it with his personal phone number. On Android, there's an app that allows you to do scheduled send, but it wasn't available for the business number. And so I just told him about this. He was super excited to hear about it. But what it was is every time he finished working on a patient, he'd step away, let the assistant finish cleaning up. And as he stepped away, he would send a text message to check in with the patient later that evening, but he's scheduling it right then when he's in the moment of doing work. And you may have seen a post I did about this. I told him about the post, and we got into this conversation, and he explained more about what he's really doing. But I thought he was sending the text messages in the evening. What it turned out is he was scheduling them in the moment of action. And that is a really important principle that I would encourage you to look into and see how you can incorporate that into your business. But you want to schedule interactions in the moment of doing, or schedule a message in the future in the moment of doing interaction with people. And the scheduled send is going to be really powerful for anybody that interacts with clients and knows the power of checking in later. In his case, he would check in later, and when he checked in, he would also, he had a little bit where he would ask for them to go give him a review if they had a good experience, if they had a bad experience, to let him know. And so that made it so that his practice has more reviews than any others in the whole city that he's in, which is I think there's like 1 million people in the city he's in. So that's a pretty good deal just from sending that message as a scheduled send. So scheduled replies is one that you're going to want to check out if you're a Fix Your Funnel user on our iOS app, the new beta release. If you haven't got it, we announced it and gave you instructions on how to get it in our Facebook group. But if you are a Fix Your Funnel user, you can just chat into support and say, hey, I want to get the new beta release, and they'll tell you how to do it. The other thing that we have in there is saved replies, meaning you can go ahead and write up that text message that you might use that asks for a referral or review or whatever the case may be, or answers to common questions that you get. And then with that, you can just quickly choose those, and you don't have to type them up every time. So that's really powerful for folks. And if you want, you can just change a couple words in it, but it's mostly written there. And so that's a really powerful feature that's there as well. Another couple things that you can get are you can get the, what's it called? You can edit the name and the email, and we'll be adding other fields that you can edit in the contact record. Of course, you can always add notes and names, but we also have it so you can listen to the calls right on your, so if you have recordings of your calls, you can listen to those right there in the notes. So quite a few updates. Excited for you guys to see that. But that's really important because live texting is the central lifeblood of text, of growing your business, is the live texting component. And so many people avoid that like the plague, and that is really where all the money is. So you want to do that. So let me go back to this last one, because what I want you to see is at the top, if you didn't already try out an automated conversation, or you don't have my book, the messaging connection yet, you can get a PDF and an audio copy by texting LEARN to 949-835-5300. Now, I'm just pointing that out to you, and I'm going to go to the next slide, and that's not going to be there, but it'll be on the slide after that. So don't stress if you want to try that out. You haven't typed it in before I go on. But I want you to point that out to you because you'll notice it's been across the top of the slides. If you do present from the stage, the secret is to always have that kind of across the top of most of your slides as you go on and present early on. In my case, I'm not really worried about that because you're on the training. I know who you are, but that's just in case you do want the book. I'm not trying to lead caption this scenario. I'm just trying to give you a copy of the book. Okay, so what we covered today is why it's 10 times more powerful than email when used correctly. And the used correctly means, do we use it as the way it was intended and it was designed and people expect it to work, which is as a conversation medium. You can immediately increase your profits and use the most powerful text. You can send new prospects, which is the why did you, or the conversation starter question. That's also how you double the sales conversations. I got cheated. I got 2 out of 1 concept, which is start conversations. You're going to have way more sales. You're going to increase profits. You're going to shorten the time from lead to customer as well, because most people don't engage and open up that door, and so their sales process takes longer than it needs to. If you actually ask that question in the initial interaction, you could realistically cut your lead to sale time in half, even for the most complicated sales. The most common element of all customers who buy is that they engage in conversation. That one is kind of subtle. I slipped that in there, but that element that's common through all people that buy is they engage in conversation. They may engage with conversation with their copy, but more people will engage actually in conversation with humans, and that's an important element of all people who buy. I taught you how to quadruple the number of people you talk to on the phone if you are calling people. And then we covered very clearly how people can give you their mobile phone number in the most effective way, which is through keywords and automated conversations. And then the most powerful use of texting that most people are avoiding, which is live texting. So hopefully you benefited greatly from being on this. The replay is going to be available in a couple of hours. So you'll probably, well, I'll give you a little preview. You guys joined this webinar through replying a keyword, most likely. And so I used the Zoom register bot to register you. In about an hour, I'm going to use the Zoom check bot, which is going to see who showed up and who didn't. And then based on that, I'm going to send you different questions and different text messages. But one of the things I'm going to ask is if you want to replay. So when you do that, they'll give you a link to the replay if you want one. And then you'll be on your way. So that should be up in the next couple hours. I just have to wait for Zoom to process it, trim the edges, and then upload it. Now at this point, I'm opening for questions. We'll take any of your questions that you may have about what we covered. We covered quite a bit. For me, it's interesting because every time's different. And I think we covered a lot more, a lot better this time. But yeah, let's see here. Yeah, just go ahead and chat in your message. That's how I take them on this. So, Eben, I see that you have a question. So if you want to go ahead and chat that in. Let me look at the Q&A because some people actually know how to use Zoom and did that. Yeah, you can share the recording with your team. So, great question. How do you get the beta again? You just chat into support. So you can go to fixyourfunnel.com. You can log in if you want, or you can not log in. It doesn't matter. If you log in, it may help them identify you quicker and just say, hey, I want to get in on the beta. There's a button that they have to push on our side that kind of populates some information into the new infrastructure that we are using for that. And then you can, they'll give you instructions on how to download the app and get it installed on your iPhone. The same technology that you have in the new app is being incorporated into our web messenger, so that you'll see a dramatic increase in speed and functionality in that in the near future. We kind of had to get all of our foundational elements in place before we could release the app and then make that change to the web version. So you'll be seeing that happening in the near future here. You may have already experienced the speed increase with the dialer and the messenger on the web, because we did upgrade the hosting on that to a new hosting that was actually close to a database. I was mentioning that at the very beginning for those folks that were here early. But if you have any other questions, go ahead and you can chat those in or ask them through the Q&A section if you know how to use that. Another question I had was, can you email me the slides to share them with my team? I'll see about getting those slides available. All right, let's see. We've been with you folks for a few years now. The challenge we have with fixed phone text messages, the grayed out spooling for 5+ minutes. So having any conversation with the contacts is almost impossible. Okay. Now, I think what you're talking about, George, is the delay in the web-based messenger, and that's actually being addressed right now. So there was a slight, you probably saw about a 40% increase in speed if you've logged in the last 2 days because of the changes that we made to infrastructure. But the next change that is happening is even more impactful. So if you get the beta app, if you have an iPhone, what you'll see is that it loads instantly, which is not the case with our previous version. And so in the next week or so, well, I shouldn't say week, it's going to take a little bit of time, but we're right now in the process of upgrading the web-based messenger to work off the same technology. And so that means it'll be instant very soon. So be looking forward to that. I'm super excited about it. It's been quite a bit. Yeah, just go ahead and, George, let the chat into support. Any member of your team can chat into support and just say, hey, we want to upgrade. It's an account-wide upgrade. They just click a button that starts the process for you, so to speak, and then you can get in. They'll give you the link to download the beta. And everybody on your team is welcome to download the beta. Now, we're calling it a beta because, you know, we're sure that there's some things you're going to find that we didn't find in all of our testing, but you can use it side by side with the old app, and it's all using the same data, so it'll be fine. But there may be some things that you'll notice that you're like, wait, why is this like this? And we'll be addressing those very quickly. And Android will be soon following behind. So great question. Okay, another question here. During a speaking engagement, would you recommend giving the keyword to the audience? Yes. Okay, so if you can still see my screen, which I assume you would be able to, what I would do typically if I'm speaking from the stage is, and you can see my slides here, probably about this slide here, or this slide here. Like you can see right here, there's about 4 slides in. I introduced it here. I didn't mention it because that's not the key reason that I'm giving this training, but I wanted to show you an example of it. So what happens is, in the first third of the presentation, and I want to have at least 10 minutes that they have to view the keyword and phone number. I want to explain to them, here's the keyword and phone number. If you text LEARN to 949-835-5300, you're going to get an audio and a digital version of my new book, The Messaging Connection. And that's a great book because it's going to teach you more about what we talked about in today's class. Okay, so that was kind of an example of how I would do the setup for the text message keyword call to action. And then you'll see that this slide didn't have it, this slide didn't have it, and then this slide did, and this slide did, and this slide did. So you kind of want to keep it at the top there for a while. If I was really concerned about lead capture, I would have kept it at the top of these two, but I needed the space, so I didn't worry about it too much. But if you do have to do that during a presentation of slides where you need more space and so you can't have it on every slide, just make sure you have it on fairly frequently, and it'll be up for at least 10 minutes after you introduce it. And that is the most effective way. I've seen people go from getting 20, 30% of the audience text in to 115% by doing that. If you're asking, well, how can you do 115? It's so good. It's so easy for them to see and remember that they start sharing with people that aren't in the audience, and that's how you get over 100%. But that's the most effective way to run that. And for sure, if you do any Q&A in a presentation or you have any portion where you're pausing, for sure have it up there and then reference it. You know, someone asks a question that's related to your call to action, say, you know what, that's a great question. I actually cover that in my book, The Messaging Connection, which in your case, Alexis, I cover this exact question in The Messaging Connection. So if you haven't already, you should text LEARN to 949-835-5300 and get a PDF copy of my book and an audio. I did audio because most people like to listen to books nowadays rather than read them, but I did the PDF because there's some visual things you're going to want to see and reference. And so that's why the PDF is included. Of course, if you must, you can always get a paper copy if I haven't already sent you one by going to Amazon for 10 bucks. So, okay, so you guys, that was an example as well as an actual invitation to get the book, but that was an example of how you would present that information in such a way that it could be most effective. Are there any other questions that have come up? I think I got, let me see if I missed any in the Q&A. Okay, there's another question here. How do I get a hold of your free book, Slower or Slide, please? Oh, okay, Isaac, sorry. I was going fast. It's up there now, so you've probably seen that. So yeah, you can just, again, text LEARN to 949-835-5300, which should be at the top of your screen right now. All right, any other questions that you guys have about texting? Oh, here's a question I may have missed. Is it better to give a separate cell phone number so you have greater availability for transitions into live texting? No, so if you're using Fix Your Funnel, for example, you could just use one number. Now, in this case, if you guys are familiar with Fix Your Funnel, you know we frequently use the 760-621-8199 number, but in this case, I'm using a totally different number. Whenever I write a book, I get a phone number for the book, and so that book owns a phone number because I want to know what people come into our circle through that particular book. And so that's why I have multiple numbers. Usually I'll use one number for my lead capture and for my live texting. And part of that is because carriers are becoming a little more stringent at the moment. The texting has been going on for a long time. Business texting has been going on for a few years now, let's say 7 or 8 years. But in the recent last year, carriers have started to tighten the noose a little bit on folks who are doing business texting. And part of the reason why, from my understanding, is because they're not getting any money out of it. If you think about, in the US at least, in probably the same in Canada, you used to be that you'd buy a bundle of text messages for your cell phone plan or mobile plan. Since then, they've gone to its unlimited texting, which was fine because a lot of the texting was segueing with the introduction of the smartphone into data networks. And so they could get the money off of the data. But as things have changed and texting now it's becoming kind of there's a renaissance period for texting because so many businesses are using it and people appreciate that they can start texting businesses. Well, that's putting new pressure on the carriers' texting networks, and they're not getting paid for it because nobody's really paying them. It's just part of what they've offered, and they're not really happy about that. So they've started to kind of make it more stringent. It used to be that you could send one text message per minute and they would just deliver them. Now, if you're doing that, they're starting to think about not delivering them, especially if it gets over like a couple hundred a day. That being said, we have people that send thousands a day that get delivered. They just keep it under a certain threshold. And that's why you may have noticed, if you're a longtime Fix Your Funnel customer, that we changed our broadcaster more recently so that it doesn't send out as quickly, but it does send out all the messages and they will get delivered because we fit under the threshold that the carriers are wanting. Well, I was recently in discussions with our carrier to talk about the situation, and they let me know that Verizon is right now, they had scheduled for February to start charging an additional 1/4 cent. That's something we're just going to eat for now. But they didn't do it in February because they got pushback from so many companies that were using texting. And so they delayed it so that companies could get their ducks in a row, I guess, or something. And so that's going to be coming supposedly in August. With that, what they're saying is that then they will deliver all messages like they used to. And so what I would predict that you guys will see is that all the carriers are going to charge an additional fee for business messaging, which is what we fall under. And with that, delivery will improve. There'll still be guidelines that like they are today, and there's things that you should do. We'll protect you for the most part with Fix Your Funnel as much as we can. But there will be some guidelines put up. There'll be some things that you need to be aware of or what have you, but they'll send the messages better. And then what will happen is they're going to take that revenue and they're going to rebuild their texting networks. And then what we'll probably see in the near future, because once Verizon shows that they can collect the money, AT&T is not going to not collect the money. So AT&T is going to fall right behind them, and then you'll have the other two that will fall right behind them. And so what will happen is they'll all be collecting money and making sure that your messages get delivered fine without the restrictions that currently we put in place. But then what will happen is with that extra money, they're going to pay for something called RCS, which is Rich Communication Service. And that is, you can imagine a text message that's more like a Facebook message. So it means that you can have buttons and you can have more dynamic data in there because it's going to be more data driven, like a MMS, but it's going to have some richer features to it. And right now, Google is pushing that out. If you're really paying attention to this industry, which you shouldn't have to, it's my job. But Google is, because there's two parties to this RCS. The carriers on their networks have to support it, and then the OS developers for mobile, so that's Android and Apple, Google and Apple, they have to support it. Google has been very aggressive on this because they're trying to get a iMessage type experience on Android. And so they've been pushing really hard on this, and that is being rolled out now in some of the European countries, and I think Australia. Not quite available to us yet, but that's starting to go out. What we'll need before we'll be able to really tap into our RCS is we're going to need that available on Apple and Android and all the carriers in the US and Canada. And so I think at that point, then we'll start seeing it be available to us. But that's something that's coming down the road. So that gives you some idea of where things are headed. But all the principles still apply. All the things we talked about today still apply. So if you follow these guidelines, if you're trying to engage in conversation, if you're treating the medium right, then all the other stuff will just be icing on the cake. If you screw it up and you don't think about conversation, if you speak at people, if you're just trying to look at them as money bags that you're trying to extract money from, you're going to get it all wrong, and it won't matter how fancy the bells and whistles are, you'll just screw it up faster. So make sure that you're taking a look at how you're messaging, you're trying to engage in conversation, you're thinking about these concepts we talked today. And if you do, I can guarantee you're going to be more effective. Now, if you are in a situation where you would like to have some additional help, just message into support and say, hey, I'd like to talk to like Ryan or Trent or one of the members of the team about what we're doing, and just get some suggestions. And we'll give you suggestions on how to improve your messaging. I've had several of those over the last couple of weeks where, again, that's where it came up that people were texting people to tell them to call. And I just was like, oh, no, I need to make sure I include that in today's training, because that's not something you want to be doing alone. By all means, invite them to call, but engage them in text, So hopefully you guys have learned a lot today. I know that if you follow the concepts we talked about today, you will see dramatic improvements in your company if you're not already doing it. If you've been doing some of it, if you incorporate some more of the stuff that we talked about, you'll see even better results. So again, let me know if you have any other questions. Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up. Yeah, there is a recording. That is that you'll get a chance to request that. If you request it before today's recording goes up, you'll see last week's recording, which was not as good, honestly. It was, the dogs were barking and people were walking in, and so I just didn't do as well. But today's was, I think, was spot on. So yeah, we'll get you a copy of that. All right, thanks so much, guys. We appreciate you making it out today, and have a great week.